They enjoy saying it every year in their economic surveys. Burkina Faso is the poorest country, Mali is the poorest country, Niger is the poorest country. We are ranked among the last.
All right. Welcome to Pan-African Perspectives. Let me know if you guys can hear me. If you guys can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Let me know where you're watching from. Today, we are going over the historic speech by Ibrahim Traore. He finally speaks out after the attempted coup and all of everything that has happened over the last week. He's been a busy man, and we are going to break it down. But before we do, again, let me know if you can hear me by giving me a thumbs up. And let me know where you're watching from. So Manelik says he can hear me. Nice. You guys can hear me on Instagram as well. So we're going to get into this in just a second. But before I do, for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to go through a little bit of an introduction of who we are and what we do here. So this is Pan-African Perspectives, where we dive into the real life experiences of visiting Africa, moving to the continent of Africa, investing in African ventures, buying land, and talking about the news of the day continent, all with the ultimate goal of advancing Africa and restoring it to its rightful place on the world stage. So our mission is to support an independent Africa and to empower African people, whether you're on the continent or in the diaspora. This live stream is for you. We are across all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and X. And we Threads as well. And our goal, again, is to connect the diaspora with African people and to talk about the things that matter. We go live 2 to 3 times a week where we talk to all the things going on the continent. I am in Freetown, Sierra Leone right now as we speak. And I'm in the Pearl Hotel. I want to thank them for making this hotel available to me. It is one of those things that requires calling out, because they let me use this hotel, and they have great internet here, and I've had some challenges with internet here in Sierra Leone. So today we are going to review this speech. Some would call it controversial. I think it's revolutionary. Before we review the speech and we listen to it, a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, it is dubbed into English. The original speech was done in French. So just to be clear, so there's going to be direct English translations. They used AI to do it. So just keep in mind that is why it's going to seem like the language doesn't completely match with what normal English tone and language sounds like. But this is in his voice, but just translated to English using different AI software. So first of all, let's talk about when he spoke. So President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso delivered a landmark speech at the first Alliance of the Sahel Alliance AES Summit in Niamey, Niger, just a couple days ago. His address was a powerful call to African unity, sovereignty, and self-determination, resonating deeply across the continent and really across the world. So there were a couple of core messages from this speech. Really 5 core messages. The first was solidarity and shared destiny. The second was resistance to external pressure. The third was redefining independence. The fourth was mutual defense and expansion of AES. And the fifth was a vision for Africa's future. Now, we're going to quickly go through what each of these were. In just a moment. But for those of you who are just joining, again, we are going to go over the, some would say, controversial speech by Ibrahim Traore. We're going to go through, and this was from just a couple days ago at the AES Summit, the first annual AES Summit. The speech was a fiery speech. It wasn't that long, but it was long enough for you all to get the message, right? So, but again, I'm just going to go through the 5 core messages that he spoke about before we go into it and then react to the speech. So first of all, it was solidarity and shared destiny. He emphasized the brotherhood among Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, highlighting their shared history, struggles, and bloodlines. He described the people of the Sahel as brothers and sisters, united by common challenges and aspirations. So that was solidarity and shared destiny. The second of which was resistance to external pressure. So he praised Niger's resilience in the face of international sanctions and economic hardship, stating that Niger's refusal to compromise its sovereignty serves as a beacon for other African nations. Rather than succumbing, Niger used adversity to strengthen the internal systems, foster regional alliances, and invest in local industries. Third was redefining independence. Traore called for a total independence, not just political, but also economic, military, and cultural. He criticized foreign powers for imposing their definitions of democracy, freedom, and human rights, insisting that Africans must define these values for themselves. Fourth was mutual defense and expansion of AES. He reinstated or reiterated that any attack on Niger would be considered an attack on all of AES members, vowing a collective and relentless defense. The AES, born in September 2023, was described as more than a military alliance. Traore called for the expanding cooperation into finance, infrastructure, health, and education. Fifth was vision for Africa's future. Traore urged African nations to build robust financial systems, modern infrastructure, and thriving economies, with the ultimate goal of ensuring the well-being of their populations and future generations. All right, so those are the 5 core messages of this speech. Now we're going to watch the speech. We may stop it from time to time just to give some reactions and some responses to it, but I just wanted to give you that background before we get into it. It looks like you guys all can hear me. We're using a new mic system. We are in Sierra Leone, so bear with me with any internet challenges, but we're going to do our best to give you this knowledge and this information because I think it's truly important. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Well, if we are as poor as they say, but when the time came to take responsibility, we asked these masters to leave. Why don't they want to leave? When we take
It's a good point, right? So, as he stated, right, and it said we asked these masters to leave. That was because they was like colonial masters. It's the direct translation between French to English. But at the very beginning of the AES, right, there was discussions of Italy, France, Germany troops leaving the AES, and there was a lot of discussion about why they did not want to leave. And there's so many external businesses, governments with their hands in the AES region. And so it took a while for these guys to peel that back and to be able to get full control of their natural resources. But through that process, there were lots of challenges doing so. And, obviously, calling them some of the poorest nations, obviously with all of those mineral resources, was really just showing that, the colonizers were not only stealing those natural resources, but not ensuring that the people of these nations were benefiting from these natural resources. So let's get back to it.
For over 40 years, some countries have been exploiting uranium to produce energy for themselves. From Ottawa to Paris, the streets are lit up. That's the light. But in Niger, it's darkness that is served to us.
Now that's literal, right? What he's saying is the uranium that comes from Niger. And by the way, the AES summit was in Niger, right? The first annual AES summit was in Niger. So the literal uranium that comes from Niger lights up cities in Canada, or cities and provinces in Canada like Ottawa. And then he also mentioned Paris, right? A city like Paris. And so the idea is to express that in Niger, they have power issues, right? They have literal power issues in Niger, much like we do in Sierra Leone and other parts of West Africa. But the uranium that comes from the ground is actually used to generate power in other countries. So when he says these countries have light and we have dark, that's exactly what he's saying. The natural resources that come from the ground in Niger lead to light in other countries, but darkness in the country that it comes from. So just a quick question here. The Charlie said, I see a lot of these videos. From my understanding, he doesn't speak English. He speaks French. Is this video translated or AI generated? It is translated in AI generation in his voice, but translated to English, which is why it has some slight challenges with the direct to English translation. Manelik says, I salute this brother for big things he's doing for both Burkina Faso and the continent, as well as trying to unite all of Africa's children the world over. Absolutely, 100%. Now, let's get back to the video.
When you go to our states, our lands are riddled with holes, everywhere in search of precious metals like gold, but often there isn't even the slightest accessible road to reach the areas where they exploit gold, let alone some basic social services. That's why we decided to revolt and take the destiny of our countries into our own hands.
I mean, pretty self-explanatory, but just think of the audacity, right? The people who have been mining these natural resources have, as I said, holes in the ground in these countries. They've dug holes, but they haven't dug roads. So these same places that have these natural resources being dug up don't have proper roads for people to be able to drive on. And so, you know, tomorrow we'll be doing a live stream with African Stream, and we'll talk through what Burkina Faso has done to completely change the infrastructure of the country with what Ibrahim Traore is doing. It's amazing stuff. We're not going to go over that here. We're going to go over that tomorrow. But just keep in mind that just think it through, right? He's speaking. It seems like it's all obvious, right? But think about how many leaders before him just sat by and watched this happen. So when the Western media talks about a coup in Burkina Faso, and they talk about him being a problem and using gold to shield himself, how could they possibly have an issue with someone who's decided to actually change his country, turn around the country that he's now been able to take over? And by the way, it's a coup when it's just a few military leaders. It's a revolution when the country is behind you. And you can see that. I mean, the country is behind him, the continent is behind him, the diaspora is behind him. Everybody's talking about what Ibrahim Traore is doing. The man is just 35 or 36 years old, and he is changing the framework and the view of how we see Africa and how the potential future of what Africa can be. And it gives a lot of us faith and hope for the future of the continent. Let me get back to it.
There are many other examples. But when we decided to do so, well, we were approached by some armchair slaves to deliver the message of their master, because they had created this kind of polymer chain that rises to the head of our states to serve them. And we came to break the chain. And it's inconceivable for them.
So again, there's going to be some strange noises because it's an AI translation. But what he was just saying is we were approached by armchair slaves. What he's speaking about is other African leaders who came and attempted to force the AES to comply with ECOWAS, African Union, European, Western viewpoints, and specific elements of what they're doing. And they refused. And so that's what he's talking about when he says armchair slaves to deliver their message, the message of the masters. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about the folks that many people agree are not the kind of leaders we want to see on the continent. That is what he is speaking about.
They approached us and asked us to fall in line, to become part of the elite that must lead Africa. Because they have a trained and conditioned elite that they must follow, who are embedded in that chain. We refused for Arafat to fall in line with them. And from then on, hostilities began.
And you guys know the hostilities began, right? I mean, there's been multiple attempted coups and attempts at Ibrahim Traoré's life. There's a difference between an attempted coup and just trying to take over. There's also then people have attempted to take his life. And so, you know, that's what he's speaking of, right? And again, tomorrow we will break down what exactly happened with this last coup and who was responsible for it, or last coup attempt, and who was responsible for it. So we'll break that down on tomorrow's live stream and this month in Africa. But, you know, I just wanted to make sure we call that out and what he's speaking to there. So let's get back to it.
Several mercenaries, trainers, agents have descended into the Sahel, hoping to carry out barbaric, cowardly attacks against our populations, hoping to incite them to revolt. In addition to these on-the-ground attacks, communication attacks, manipulation, and disinformation are rampant in their ranks. But the people of the Sahel have understood, and never again will they be manipulated. They know where they come from, they know what they are doing, and they know where they are going. We will no longer allow this. People are awake and fighting today, not for ourselves, but for future generations. And thank you all for the fight that is being waged. This never makes us cry. We will not tremble. We will face it. We will fight for true independence, for our freedom. Because to scare the people of AES, these individuals only have 3 terms in their mouths: democracy, freedom, human rights. Of course, their local lackeys are only elected in a democratic, free, and transparent process, according to them, their values.
So to be clear, right? He's not saying he has any issues with democratic values, freedom, or any of those things. What he is expressing is the fact that there's hypocrisy coming from the folks who preach these things. You heard last week when we went live with Gloria Ayo, when she was talking about the fact that there are other countries in Africa where they've used intimidation tactics and other things to elect specific leaders through a quote unquote democratic process, which is why he air quoted that. And so, you know, and many people in the United States and other countries around the world, their biggest complaint is they feel like their voices aren't heard. They feel like when they're voting for someone, it's a lesser of 2 evils or the lesser of 4 evils, depending on the country that they're in. What he's saying is that a better process than what they have in the AES? Because it seems like in the AES, the people got what they wanted, whereas other people seem to be more complaining about the leaders that they have. The United States, you have, you know, 60+% disapproval rating on this particular president. You had a similar, slightly better disapproval rating on the prior president. There are going to be large swaths of the population that are not okay with who was elected because they don't feel like it was the person that they chose. But with Ibrahim Traore, they wanted him in power in Burkina Faso. And when he took over, you see how people have responded. So he's basically just saying that the idea of freedom, democratic values, you know, these things that he's talking about, he doesn't disagree with the actual concepts. What he's saying is the people who are preaching it aren't actually living up to it. So let's get back to it.
What could be more normal? That they want to impose this on us because they are the ones who set the rules. Very well. We have decided to take responsibility for ourselves. That's why on July 26, 2023, when Niger decided to turn the page, the armchair slaves and their masters got on their high horses. They put their local lackeys forward and decided to wage a war against the Nigerian people. So we said,
to be clear, see, again, this is AI translation. He said he meant it, what he says actually is Nigerian people, not Nigerian people. Just to be clear, it was the Nigerian people is he's talking about. So he's talking about Niger, not Nigeria. Just wanted to clarify that for those watching. But yeah, so that was when Niger had their changeover in power.
who dares to attack Niger will face us, because we will wage a relentless war to the last drop of blood against anyone who dares to attack our states. This statement, this decision we made yesterday is relevant today and will be relevant tomorrow and forever. Thus, the AES was born on September 16th, 2023, within a framework of mutual defense. But we deemed it necessary to extend and expand the architecture of the AES. What brings us together today should allow us to venture into other areas beyond defense, notably finance and economy, infrastructure, health, education, and so on. I hope that these moments will be a story we write for the AES, but especially for Africa and the entire world. May God enlighten each and every one of us. May God inspire us in these tasks entrusted to us. And above all, when we carry out our work, let us keep one thing in mind: the supreme interest of our populations. With that, we pray once again to the good Lord to accompany us all in our various tasks, to protect our fighters, who, thanks to them, allow us to sit here and discuss the future of our states. Once again, thank you, people of Niger. Be united and in solidarity. People of the AES, the homeland.
There we have it. That is.
All right, so that was the speech. I would love to hear from you guys. I saw some comments. I want to hear from you guys what you guys thought of that speech. I mean, look, the man is more than 5 years younger than I am, and I'm impressed. I'm really impressed by how he handles himself and all of what he's dealing with. I mean, imagine being 35 years old, 36 years old, head of a country, and dealing with all the things that he's dealing with, right? And making all the change that he's changing. I mean, I can only imagine what that must be like. So a couple of comments. So we had Amir, the photographer, is letting us know that President Traore and Steph Curry were born on the same day. Okay. I think Steph Curry it's interesting. Steph Curry has had his own impact, but a very different one. And it's interesting to see that these two very different people born on the same day. Okay. A Million Praise TV says, I don't trust African leaders. Africa is rich, but they sold all our wealth to the Western world. Okay. The Charlie said, my prayers for him is to succeed and the higher power to provide a shield of protection that cannot be broken. He's a real inspiration for us all. For all of us in Africa and the diaspora. And then Simanera, says, big up Traore. Yeah. Any other comments, questions, or thoughts so far? I thought there were a lot of people messaging earlier on. I couldn't get to them on Instagram. All right, so let me at least say some things, to kind of give additional context here. So, why Niger's example matters, right? So Niger was sanctioned, right? After the coup in Niger, or the revolution in Niger, they were sanctioned by the African Union and by ECOWAS and a number of other member states that said, you know, they were cutting them off from the outside world. And why it matters is that Niger's defiance in the face of sanctions and external pressures was spotlighted as a model for African resilience and self-reliance. Traore argued that Niger's leaders prioritized their people's well-being over foreign demands, transforming adversity into an opportunity for internal growth and regional solidarity. So the broader impact is, you know, Traore's speech at the AES summit was more than a political statement, but it was a blueprint for sustainable development and a rallying cry for new, united, and independent Africa. The summit underscored that unity, mutual defense, and collective action are essential for resisting external pressures and achieving real freedom. So, you know, this was a serious summit. And, you know, obviously this was where they spoke publicly, but there were obviously conversations behind closed doors. I'm looking forward to seeing what they decided to do and where they're going. Again, you know, for those who were democratically elected separately, I'm interested to see how they respond to this. It looks like there are certain countries that are, you know, aligning themselves with the AES. You know, Ghana seems to be friendly with what's going on in the AES, the new president, Mahama. Morocco, apparently, and we'll talk about this we talked about this last Thursday, is opening up pathways for the AES, who are landlocked countries, to have access to the Atlantic Ocean. And so that means that they would have improved trade routes. If they want to do trade with some of these other countries, they can do it by sea. And so you can bring large freight into the country through the water, which, by the way, is the number one way that goods and goods are transported globally, right? Most people don't know that, but with the tariffs happening in the United States, you'll see where there's going to be some major issues with the supply chain. And it happened during the global sickness a few years ago. And so it's happening again now with these tariffs. And, you know, America will finally kind of see what that looks like. But when it comes to the continent of Africa, there are certain countries that just don't have access. They're landlocked. And because of how they decided to change leadership, they have been isolated from the outside world and limited to how they can access resources from other countries. But now with not being landlocked and having partners that have access to the Atlantic Ocean, that will allow them to be able to import a lot more and export a lot more under their own recognizance, the way they want and the way they need to for their own country. Any other comments, thoughts, concerns? We got people saying, you know, power to Traore. Lots of fists, lots of hearts. Jackie Linton says, I've watched videos where they're building roads, giving out equipment to farmers so that they can farm their own food, free healthcare, and free education. Yes, these are all things that we are going to talk about on tomorrow's live stream. So make sure you guys stay tuned tomorrow to This Month in Africa, because I am going to be sitting down with Enem Richardson, who is one of the journalists for African Stream. She is splitting her time between Niger and Burkina Faso. So she was in Niger during this summit. She's just opened up the Thomas Sankara Center in Niger, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow. And really what you're seeing with Ibrahim Traore is someone who studied the likes of Thomas Sankara, and, you know, who was a former leader of Burkina Faso, who he himself was unfortunately met his demise to Western powers who didn't like his stance on African unity and African independence. And so what we're seeing here with Ibrahim Traore is an extension of that, a new version of that. And so we're going to meet tomorrow at, 3 p.m. GMT to basically go through what has been going on in the AES. We're going to break down all of these things. So you mentioned building roads, giving out equipment to farmers, food, healthcare, education. We're going to talk about all of the things that have been launched in the AES, and specifically by Ibrahim Traore. We're also going to dive deeper into who exactly was behind the attempted coup on Ibrahim Traore over the last couple of days. I think you'll find it interesting who it was, and I look forward to sharing that information with you all. I'm sure many of you are probably not aware, but we will get right to the bottom of it on tomorrow's live stream. I will also say, for those of you who are still watching, the e-commerce store has been relaunched. You can go to authenticafrican.com and find products and services made on the continent of Africa. There are products that are made, so they're ethically sourced, handmade products. We do have products that come from Burkina Faso. We do have products that come from other parts of the AES, Mali as well, and then other parts of the continent. So if you're looking to support artisans who live in those regions, we do have masks, carvings, things that you can decorate your house with, but also you can be supporting folks from these regions. All right, so let's get back into some of the comments. There's more comments coming. So let's see what we got here. So Bervelin Jumping says, it's about time African youth take charge. We urge the Sahel region to facilitate this for a pan-African army. Ibrahim, our very own savior. That includes the two brothers of Mali and Niger. Then Jada Faith says, I've heard some African influencers speak negatively about Mali's new president just being given another 5 years in office without an actual election. What do you think about it? That's a good question. So that was the same thing that happened with Burkina Faso. So here's the question that I have. And you guys, I want to hear from you guys on this one, because I think for most of human history, humans have gone through history with single leadership through a family lineage and have been happy with it as long as they've gotten what they wanted. The idea of democracy was introduced, if I'm not mistaken, through the Greeks, later the Romans, and then quote unquote perfected by the United States of America. Now, I think that in every instance that I just mentioned, there were folks who had challenges with that. Now, there was always a version of democracy on the continent of Africa, right? So although you had rulers of specific kingdoms, you also had elders who were a part of processes that would ensure that the needs of the people were met, right? So there was still kind of an elective process in terms of which elders could speak up and things of that nature, even though there was generally a lineage that led to leadership. And then all around the world, there has been leadership in that way. And so what do you guys think makes more sense? Mali is one of the fastest growing economies in the entire world since, if it's not Goita, I think it's Goita who took over. Now, with that being the case, right? Do you think it makes sense to disrupt that with another process for somebody else to take over? You guys tell me what you guys think. Do you think it would be a disruption? Do you think they should have had an election? You know, I hear this conversation here, and it sounds like there are, you know, influencers that are not happy with that. What I think we should ask is, what do the people of Mali say? Are they happy with it? Because at the end of the day, that's who it comes down to, right? What are the masses in Mali saying? I think that's where we should determine how we feel about this, right? We sometimes have to remember that we have a specific mindset from where we come from, right? So how we grew up, the things that were presented to us, how they were presented to us, you know, kind of forms and shapes the way many of us think and see the world. And so we tend to put on those glasses and view the world from that perspective. But I think you have to think about what the people of Mali want. You know, have they said they're not happy with him getting 5 more years? I know in Burkina Faso, when he said he was extending for a few more years just to make sure that there was a peaceful transition of power and they had a process in place, the mass majority, the large majority of Burkina Faso were excited about that. because they were tired of these other leaders that have been there exploiting the country's natural resources and not furthering benefiting and benefiting their countries, but really personally benefiting themselves. Bervelin says, oh, no, the westernized democracy, look at where the Sahelian kings working for the masses of their nations. Yes, if so, what is the problem? What is then the problem? We would rather have an Africanized democracy. Okay. Anybody else have anything to say? Let's see what else we have. There's a bunch of people showing their support for Traore. Long live Traore. Somebody says Grifuego. Got it. Sorry about that. Amanda Precious says, flex. Lord Mickey says, may the spirit of our ancestors protect you guys from Nigeria. This is somebody who's watching from Nigeria. Shout out to you. Mr. Forsyth says 100. Darian Clary says, give thanks for this in spirit, love. Okay. So generally in support of Ibrahim Traore's speech. I don't find too many people who aren't, unless they work for, foreign governments. So Constantine Mendez Francis says, he's the man and could be my son. I'm so proud of him. Okay. Carrington says, I love the way he calmly talks with conviction. Happy Roster says Cameroon needs also that kind of president. J.R. Mouse Jr. says, my prayers for him is to bring Africa as one continent as Europe continent, and he should look back in anything. Okay. God bless him and God bless Africa. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think where Ibrahim Traore is looking to go is eventually like a United States of Africa, right? You already see there's a federation of the AES, and now these countries are becoming independent states of the AES. One flag, they're looking for one military and one leader of the AES, and they're building a federation. And through that, they have collective bargaining, as I mentioned before. And I think many of the continent of Africa, many on the continent of Africa and around the world are hoping that something similar would happen. All right. So Kwame says no election. Usman says Pan-African People's Liberation Army should be formed throughout the continent of Africa to protect Black people in the entire world. Let's see, what other comments and thoughts do we have? TXN CPX says, and the government to do a contract with African USA are on control in my country. Okay, I think he had said something previously, but I didn't see it. There's a lot of comments coming in, so I'm trying to catch them. Art something says African leadership needs to learn from Eritrea. Okay, that's interesting. We must unite. No, the media are praising. Okay, that was hard to read. Sorry, I don't think there's a direct English translation. Africom are trading our military, and we know that. Man, that's tough to read. Sometimes I think you guys are doing direct translations to English, and you're missing some letters and words, and I think it's hard to read. But I get what you're saying. Algeria is saying they support him, or Kevin the Goat from Algeria says they support him. Hins says I love him. Black J says just joined from Kenya. Nigeria needs this sweep of Nigeria. If Nigeria can move, Africa will change. That is what TZ Bryan said. All right. Any other comments, thoughts on this before we go. I'd love to hear from you guys. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Share this with at least 3 or 4 people you know who are wondering what is happening in the AES right now. What has Ibrahim Traore been talking about? How does his speeches go? You know, many people have been reading his speeches, and you know, it's tough because most of his speeches are in a foreign language to many of us who are from the UK, the US, and so you know, we need translation. So the reason why I wanted to use this particular video instead of doing it in French with the subtitles was because I figured it'd be a little bit easier to just kind of stop and talk about it and, you know, commit it to memory for those of you guys who are listening and make it a core memory as opposed to trying to hear it in French and then translating it to English on screen. And so I hope that was helpful. You guys let me know. And anytime we go over a Ibrahim Traore speech in the future, I can either go to French and you can do the language of the natural language that he speaks in, or I can keep it with any of the translated to English versions that are out there. Sorry, guys, I need hydration. I was on a plane for I was in transit for 24 hours, Saturday through Sunday. Woke up this morning very early and got right to work, running errands and getting things going. And that's why we started late today. So I apologize for starting late. The goal was to get this information to you no matter what, even though it's been a rough and long day. Here we go. Mosi Main says, how do we get Ivorians to speak up against the destabilization efforts of the government? That's tough. I don't know what the constitution of the Ivory Coast has in terms of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. You know, that's a tough one because I think a lot of people are worried about, you know, loss of life and casualties, because it does happen in countries where you're openly defiant of the government. I'm not saying that's what would happen in the Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire, but I think that there are people who are a little bit worried about that, which is probably why they don't tend to protest. And what I find a lot of times is people who live in the diaspora tend to push protests, but won't be on the ground to do it. There's a lot of people galvanizing people from afar. And I think it's important that if you're going to do that, you should be on the ground with them. You know, when Martin Luther King did the March on Washington, when they did the sit-ins, you know, on all of these occasions, he was involved in it himself personally. It wasn't like he was doing it from afar and wasn't there. You know, Malcolm X obviously was on the front lines of the Nation of Islam movement, and then later, you know, what he was doing after he left. And so I think it's important that if you're going to be a leader and you're going to speak about these things, that you're going to be in it as well. You know, so I think that there's a reason why some folks are a little bit nervous because of, you know, the potential for loss of life. So Jada Faith says, speak on the other country speaking the wrong side, i.e., yeah, well, we just talked about that. Jada Faith says, and is this live only about Burkina Faso? Yes, it is. It is. This live stream was only about not only Burkina Faso, but specifically Ibrahim Traore's speech, right? I wanted to do the speech that he gave at the AES summit. You know, look, he's a student of Pan-Africanism and the Pan-African movement going all the way back to its, you know, roots. And so you can tell that by how he speaks. And so his speech is the one that caught the attention of so many around the world. Farquan Ali says, Ivory Coast one day will come into the fold. It's just a matter of time. We hope so. We hope so. You know, look, even though they're neighboring countries, it doesn't mean that as a neighboring country, the leadership is ready to give up the power that they have, and I'm not speaking specifically about Cote d'Ivoire. I'm talking about just countries neighboring them in general on either side, whether they're the Sahelian countries, the sub-Saharan countries, or above the Saharan desert. You know, there are folks that are not really willing to give up their power and to you know, basically do the things that Burkina Faso is doing. So just keep that in mind, that it's going to be difficult to see that shift quickly. Johnson Poku says, if Burkina wanted their leader to continue, why not Mali? Western democracy is now old school in Africa. Well, not everything works for everywhere, I would say. So yeah, I mean, I think where we are today, I think many people in those countries would agree that they're happy with what they have today. Jada Faith says, because you're Sierra Leone, what's going on in Yanga? I'm sorry, can you rephrase that? I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Are we talking about the border? Oh, we're talking about the border with Guinea and the dispute over the town. You know what? We'll do that on a specific Sierra Leone live stream for sure. I am going to be going live this Sunday with, likely with the Sierra Leoneans killing it. So we'll talk all about Sierra Leone and be specific there. Don't worry. Conversations about Sierra Leone are still happening weekly on Sundays. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming. But as of today, we'll keep it to Ibrahim Traore's speech. So that's what everybody came here for. Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts on this speech? I think we are at time, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say thank you all for joining the live stream. Again, if you don't already, subscribe, hit that notification bell. So if you're notified every time a new video comes out, share this with anybody you know who's looking to move to the continent, to visit the continent, who's thinking about wanting to learn more about what Ibrahim Traore is all about. You're going to get a chance to, they'll get a chance to hear that here. And also, if you haven't already, comment in the follow-up comments or live as well. Shout out to Lenora, who's in the building. What's up, Lenora? All right, guys, thanks again for watching. I will see you all on the next video.